The British Empire, the world's largest colonial power, prided itself on being a liberal democracy, but in reality, it was much worse than you might think. Here is a stark example of the brutal exploitation and racism of colonial rule. Sarah Baartman, an African woman who was among the black women who were subjected to sex trafficking. Baartman's large buttocks and elongated labia were considered unusual and exotic, and she was exhibited in London and Paris, where people paid to mock and gawk at her. She was forced to perform degrading acts, treated as less than human, and denied any dignity. Even after she died in 1815, the exploitation continued. Her brain, skeleton, and sexual organs remained on display in a Paris museum until 1974. It was not until 2002, nearly 200 years later, that her remains were finally repatriated to South Africa and given a proper burial. This dehumanization was the dark reality of colonialism, a system that saw people like Sarah as commodities to be exploited for profit and entertainment. Now, what you're witnessing is one of the most brutal execution methods used by the British during their rule in India, meant to crush the spirits of anyone who thought about resisting British rule. The victim was tied to the mouth of a cannon, his chest pressed against the cold metal. At the signal, the cannon was fired with a deafening roar. The explosive blast tears through the man, obliterating him in an instant. His body is shattered, blown to pieces, leaving nothing but a horrific mess and a silent, eerie smoke. It's so horrible. Now look at this disturbing photo from around 1900. In this image, we see a Sikkimese woman in West Bengal, India, carrying her British master on her back, who is seated on a traditional stretcher-like palanquin. There's some debate about whether he was British or French, but many sources confirm he was a British officer stationed in Sikkim. Imagine the daily lives of the people in Sikkim under British rule. This image lays bare the brutal reality of colonialism. Imagine this. It's 1943 in Bengal, India. You see skeletal figures, their ribs protruding painfully, their eyes hollow with despair. This image is a haunting reminder of one of history's most devastating and deliberately engineered tragedies: the Great Bengal Famine of 1943. This catastrophic event claimed the lives of over 3 million people, and it wasn't caused by drought or natural disaster, but rather by the cold, calculated policies of the British Empire under Prime Minister Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill, often celebrated as a hero of World War II, played a direct role in this horror. His government prioritized the needs of British and American troops over the survival of millions of Indians. Despite Bengal having above-average rainfall that year, which should have prevented a famine, the British colonial policies ensured that vital resources were diverted away from the starving population. Food was exported from India, while the local people were left with nothing. Churchill's administration implemented inflationary policies that drove the price of rice up by 300%, making it unaffordable for ordinary people. When Indian officials begged for emergency food shipments, Churchill coldly refused, even mocking the victims by blaming their plight on them breeding like rabbits. This photograph shows a British man relaxing in luxury, while 2 Indian servants attend to him like he's a king. One servant is gently fanning him, ensuring his comfort in the sweltering heat, while the other, on a bent knee, performs the demeaning task of massaging his feet. This was the harsh reality for many Indians under British rule, reduced to mere instruments for the convenience and luxury of their colonial masters. Imagine the depths of despair these children must have felt, reduced to scrambling in the dirt for a few coins tossed by someone who saw them as less than human. This isn't just a casual act. It's a painful reminder of the brutal power dynamics that define British colonial rule. These children, forced into desperate poverty by a colonial system that stripped their land and resources, are reduced to scrambling for coins as if they were mere animals in a zoo. The woman's act is not one of charity, but of humiliation, a stark illustration of how colonialism crushed the spirit of entire generations. As you look at these signs reading, "Dogs and Indians are not allowed," you're witnessing the cruel reality of British colonial rule. These signs, prominently displayed in clubs, hotels, and public places during British rule in India, symbolized the deep-rooted racism that justified the subjugation and dehumanization of millions. The British weren't just after India's land. They wanted its riches. They drained the country of its natural resources like coal, cotton, and iron ore, shipping them back to fuel their factories. Indians who built the railroads that transported these resources were barred from first-class compartments, even if they could pay. These compartments were reserved for the British, as they viewed Indians as less than human, much like animals. In this photo, an Indian man, likely a servant, is pouring water over a British colonizer, a scene that painfully highlights the dehumanizing conditions imposed on the native people. The British treated Indians as mere tools for their comfort, stripping them of dignity and freedom in their own land. This photograph shows British colonizers enjoying a lavish meal while an Indian punkawalla laboriously works in the background, pulling a rope to keep the fan moving. In the sweltering heat of India, British colonizers exploited punkawallas, Indian men whose job was to keep large cloth fans, or punkas, in motion. These fans were everywhere, in bedrooms, dining rooms, and bathrooms, ensuring the colonizers' comfort. The punkawallas, often seated in the corner, were kept out of sight yet always within earshot, leading some British families to prefer deaf servants so their conversations wouldn't be overheard. The treatment of these men was brutal. They were subjected to cruel methods to keep them awake, such as tying their hair to prevent sleep or sprinkling sugar on the ground so ants would bite their sweaty bodies if they nodded off. For this grueling labor, they received a pittance, around 3 rupee per month in the 1880s. What you're seeing here is a British woman being carried in a palanquin, a type of enclosed chair or litter, by 4 Indian men. This wasn't just a mode of transportation. It was a blatant display of power and control. The colonists sat comfortably while the native laborers, often subjected to brutal conditions, did all the heavy lifting, both literally and figuratively. The visual contrast between the luxury of the colonists and the hardship of the laborers speaks volumes about the injustices of that era. This photo is a chilling reminder of the brutal realities of British colonialism in the Congo. Here, a British officer lounges comfortably in a hammock, being carried by a Congolese man. The stark contrast between the officer's relaxed posture, complete with a pipe in his mouth, and the visible strain on the face of the Congolese man tells a powerful story of exploitation and oppression. 132 enslaved Africans, including women and children, were brutally thrown overboard during the Zong massacre in 1781. A shocking event that exposed the cruelty of the transatlantic slave trade. Aboard the British slave ship Zong, the crew, facing a shortage of supplies and a prolonged voyage, decided to jettison these sick and dying individuals to claim insurance money for lost cargo. Here, you see British police standing watch over a group of Kenyans, their hands raised in surrender as their homes are searched. These men, women, and children were caught in the crossfire of a conflict that sought to crush the Mau Mau fighters, freedom fighters who rose up against the injustices of British colonial rule. The Mau Mau uprising was a rebellion against British colonial rule in Kenya, where the local population was subjected to violence, forced labor, and land seizures. This image captures the harsh reality of colonialism, where entire communities lived under constant fear, their dignity stripped away, as they were treated not as people, but as obstacles to be controlled and suppressed. Bushmen, chained like dogs to be sold as slaves by British colonizers. This image is a stark and painful reminder of that grim reality. Here, you see a group of Africans, captured and chained around 1907 or 1908, their expressions a haunting mixture of fear, defiance, and sorrow. Notice how the men on the far left and right wear pass badges around their necks, a cruel symbol of control and subjugation. These chains weren't just physical restraints. They symbolized the loss of freedom, dignity, and humanity. The images you've seen are not just historical records. They are real brutality of British rule, where even the smallest acts were designed to humiliate and dehumanize. Each image tells a story of pain, exploitation, and resistance. A history that should never be forgotten. If you found this as shocking as we did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the darkest corners of human history. Thanks for watching.